There you go, everybody.
On?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hey, let's wait 2 more minutes, but a lot of people are already joining. Good. So let me share my screen. So do we already have quorum? Let me see. It's Michael, it's Milan, it's me, Riemann, Stoyan. Alex just joined. Okay. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, cool. So welcome to the TSC meeting. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong screen. Here we go. So welcome to the TSC meeting of the Hiero project. As any other meeting of the Hiero project, this is a public meeting, which means everybody can attend the TSC meeting as any other of our Hiero meetings. And you find invites to this meeting and any other meeting in our public calendar. That one is linked on the Hiero.org webpage. It's linked in our GitHub main page and in more or less every minute, where you can find a calendar with all our events we do under Hiero, all publicly, like community events like the TSC event, or events like for specific projects, like here for the Python SDK, All of those events are recorded, and if you missed one event, you can just go in the past, and when you click on one event, you see like the recording and an AI summary. And if you want to join our Hiero events in general, what I would really love to see you there is you can click this icon button, and then you can subscribe to the calendar in Gmail, in Google Mail, no, in Google Calendar or in Apple Calendar or whatever your favorite calendar system is. Okay, and since we have hope to get a community that is growing with more and more people joining these meetings, it's even more important to be friendly to each other in such a diverse community. And with that, all our meetings happen under the code of conduct of the Linux Foundation. This do not contain anything special. It defines in general how we want to interact with each other, right? So just be friendly to other persons when joining conversations, joining discussions, asking questions, and so on, and then you will be totally fine. And next to that, the meetings we do happen under the antitrust policy of the Linux Foundation. And with that, we have a agenda with several points today. And the point I would like to start with, it's not the top one here on the list, but it's the higher graduation. And we've spoken in, I think, the last 2 or 3 TSC meetings already about that we created a request for the Linux Foundation to move the Hiero project to graduation. I have linked the request here, and in the technical advisory committee of the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust, we had a final voting. Last week on Thursday, Diane was there, Jessica was there, I was there, and I again presented everything we are doing here and our request. And I'm more than happy to say that Hiero is now graduated within the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. And the interesting or maybe important thing here is that it's not only that we are graduated, we are the first project that got, which moved from incubation to graduation under the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. So we are the first one there, which is really great. And we achieved that in less than a year, because next month in September, and yeah, time is flying, is like the first anniversary of the Hiero project. In September last year, it was announced, I think on the 16th or 18th, and we achieved to become graduated in less than a year, and I believe that is really a great success. And yeah, Keith, I see your point. Please, let's put it to any other business regarding adding something to the agenda, and otherwise ping me afterwards so that we definitely will have it on the next agenda. And I see Diane has hands up.
Yeah, so I wanted just to say that that not only is it within the first year and the first project to get out of the LFDT's new project lifecycle requirements too, which were stricter than previously under the Hyperledger. And I have to say I was incredibly impressed, Hendrik, with the way that you patiently answered all the questions at the TAC meeting, and for all of your patience and detail-oriented Jessica getting the report done. The two of them did an amazing job marshaling it all through. And, definitely the standards are higher under the LFDT, and you should all be very proud of achieving this, including the diversity that's coming into the community organizationally and individually. The developers and contributors and maintainers just really showed up, and thank you. I'm really really happy to see this happen within this time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, Jessica, you and me, that was really a great team moving that forward. That worked
Yeah.
quite. Thank you.
There will also be a short blog post. I just need Hendrik to review it one more time right after this on hiero.org, that if you want to take a look through, it's not a technical deep dive or anything like that. And we probably should do one more blog post that does review what's been in the releases over the past year. That was a request from the LFDT blog editor yesterday that we do another one. So if someone wants to collaborate on writing that, let us know, and we'll get something out on the LFDT. Go for it, Jessica.
Good, Jessica.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I'm very, very proud of everybody because many of these graduation status requirements also require the effort from the maintainers. And I really wanted to say that I am very proud of the entire team. And yes, the other thing that is very important to know is that now we have to maintain the status. And I think and so I think the since this is the first time we're graduating under the LFDT, the similar way that we were the project setting up the standards for how graduation is going to look like now on, the same way that we're going to be setting up the standard as well on how maintenance of the status looks like as well. So I'm going to be working with the tag to define those standards, and I'm going to be working still with everybody here to make sure that we keep on things on track, especially OpenSSF scores. That was probably what I think it was the most difficult point to make with the LFDT tag. So you might still see us, Hendrik, myself, and others as well, going back and forth about scores, etc. So that is just because we want to make sure we maintain the status as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe to show that most of you will know, we now have OpenSSF scorecards automatically be created for all of our projects, and while a lot of them are quite in a good shape, which is like 7 and above, we have some where the value is not that good, and all of that is reasonable. I mean, looking at the Hiero improvement proposal, which has a value of 5, that is because it's not a source project, right? So it's not a source code project that contains the HIPs. And HIPs are long-running pull requests, so you don't create a small pull request and somebody looks over it and it's merged. We have those pull requests open for quite a long of time. And all those things are affecting the scores of the OpenSSF scorecards. And what I really like is that especially Jessica is taking all those findings we have and bring them back to the OpenSSF and to LFX for LFX Insights, what we use to make those tools better based on the things we learned while working on this graduation process. Okay, any questions or comments to that topic? Otherwise, we can move forward. Okay, cool. So the next topic, yeah, we have the HIPS topic here. Thanks to Richard, we now have this awesome board, and oh, that should be updated, right? Oh, Richard, or is Mark here? Mark, who is doing updates on those? Because this one should be approved or not. We voted on that one last week.
I think we were giving it 14 days, so I was planning to come back to it next week.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, okay. And this one is still in development, right? There were so many comments. I looked into that one.
Yeah.
That is,
Yep.
yeah, okay, perfect. Good. Okay, good. So on the TSC side, we do not have any topics for today, which brings us to our new next election. So next month we will again have an election in the TSC. While we, since 2 months now, have filled all our seats, we have the first seat that needs a re-election because seats are normally defined for 2 years. We decided at the beginning of the project to switch things a little bit so that the whole board is re-elected at one point. And with that, we have an election of the TSC seat that is currently held by George. And I created an overview of the TSC election phase. And as you can see, the thing starts today with a nomination period starting today and running until September 9th. If anybody of you wants to nominate a person to the TSC, feel free to create a pull request. It's written down here in the bottom how to nominate based on a sample that Jessica and I have been created. In general, you need to give the name, the GitHub ID, why the person is qualified, and a statement regarding the person being in the TSC. And self-nominations surely are totally fine here. And with that, you can do a nomination. So nomination will be accepted until September 9th. And then on September 10th, which is another TSC meeting, the TSC meeting more or less in 2 weeks, we will do a short presentation of all the nominations, and then the election will start. So that is an election that is run by 12 days, so that it ends shortly before the TSC meeting in end of September, which is on the 23rd of September. And on that day, we will then announce whoever is starting on that date then part of the TSC. Are there any questions on that? As always, Jessica from LF will take care about the voting tooling, will prepare everything, set up everything that the correct people are allowed to vote on it. Yeah, so any questions here?
No,
Good.
great,
Oh,
great
yeah.
documentation here and making it clear.
Perfect. Thank you. So, and I hope to see some nominations then coming in over the next 2 weeks. Good. Then let's move forward. Oh yeah, I have 3 smaller topics where I and Jessica worked on some documentation we would like to share. So one thing we started is an FAQ for mostly maintainers. I believe it can be used for committers too. It's still open because some discussions are going on. And what we did here is we collected especially a lot of questions that came from Hashcraft employees who started to work on Hiero, who became maintainers or committers in the project and had some questions regarding that, like what is the difference between working now for Hashcraft, working for Hiero, how is the role really structured, and all that, how is it bound to a job? Everything like that is part of that FAQ. And I hope that this one is growing so that we can, whenever we see people have questions on our, government and guidelines, then we can add those questions to this FAQ. as said, some discussions are still going on here, but I believe we can merge that quite soon. Okay, and the other thing is that we added some new roles when it comes to governments. So, and that is, oh no, that is open too. So what the point is here, so far we have this project maintainer and project committer role. And this PR will add two new roles, which is the project triage contributor and the project board contributor. Because we have learned that as an example, at Hashgraph, we have some people who work in project management, who do not commit to a project, but who would like to manage how the Hashgraph engineers work on that project, assign issues, do like Scrum planning with teams, and so on and so on. And some of the things that are needed for that, like assign people to issues, is nothing a contributor can do, right? So you need a kind of at least minimalistic role to do that. And with that, we decided to have those two roles that will allow managers, product leads, whoever who are not working on a technical basis, to have the rights to do their work. And our idea here is that the allowance to add people to that role is approved just by the TSC, and I'm totally fine to do that. I assume it's not much of work that need to be done here, and to define who is allowed to that. Our idea was to say, like, look, so everybody who's working at a company, and where is it written down? Working at a company that is an LFDT member can be granted to get that role. So this is still a pull request. If you have any thoughts on it, please have a look at it and leave your comment. I hope that we get that one live in the future to make people who are managing those projects work more easy and more effective. Any questions on those two documents? I see new comments here. Oh, we already have a nominee. Great. Thank you, Michael. A role that can review but cannot merge. So there's a question from Sophie if we have an idea to add intermediate roles, like a role that can review pull requests but cannot merge. So I would say everybody can review, right? So I could go to any project on GitHub and review a pull request there. The point is that my review will not count to this minimum number of reviews that is needed to allow merge. So I ask myself if that is enough, or why do you think a role that has more rights than that is needed? So maybe you can explain that a little bit more, where this idea is coming from, or where you see a benefit. Okay. So yeah, okay. So Sophie is writing that there is a fast expansion in the Python SDK and that it's difficult to keep up with requests. First of all, that is great. I mean, that means that we get a lot of contribution. I like that, and I know that a lot of that is coming from your great work in that repository and the community. And yeah, so this check, do a rebase and things like that. That is, I'm just seeing what you're writing. So Sophie is writing, a lot of feedback would be first, please do a rebase, or please check automatic code analyzers or things like that. So that is, everybody can do. Every contributor could do that. I could today go to a pull request in, I don't know, let's take in Kubernetes as an example, and add such a command to the pull request. That would be totally fine. So I don't think that we need a special role for that. Maybe it's more teaching people that that can be done. Okay, yeah, maybe to honor people and to get responsibility. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So maybe Sophie, we can discuss that in the next community meeting. I believe that would be a very good topic for the community meeting, and then we can even have a look on how workflows could look like, and what we can do to get more people to do reviews. Good. Any other questions? Okay.
I have a question. Did we settle on so let's say like Michael Cantor creates a PR for a HIP. Did we settle on how that HIP is presented? Can he just add it to the agenda and start talking about it?
So if so, I would say it's not like only Hashgraph or whoever who can put a
Right.
HIP to the agenda. So my point of view is, if somebody is working on a HIP, writing a HIP, and assumes that it's in a stable state to be prepared, that person should come to the TSC, maybe especially to me, because I'm creating the agenda, and then I will be more than happy to put it on the agenda. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you so much.
Sure, absolutely. Very good question. Thank you. And I know we will have it in future, because I know Michael Cantor is working on a HIP, and I already did an initial review. So I believe exactly that point will come in future. So that's really a very good question. Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that still is just a little bit mysterious, and it could just be from my own lack of research, what the end-to-end process for HIP should look like now that we have the TSC. Is the process essentially we bring up the HIP for discussion at the TSC, and then it goes through something internal, or is there a step that happens before that?
It sounds like these meetings create a totally open environment. So if you're going to make a HIP, and maybe I'm incorrect here, if somebody correct me if I'm wrong. If you're going to make a HIP, just evangelize it, get reviews, bring it up in this meeting, and then bring it to a vote. I think that's the process.
I would say the same, and Richard has hands up.
Yeah, 100%. So I think, let me explain maybe just briefly how we do it at Hashgraph, and then so from the outside, from the big picture perspective, is that anybody can do whatever process they want to prepare a HIP to get it to the point where they think that it's ready for review, and then they can put it on the agenda for the TSC, present it to the TSC, and then we have a couple weeks to do discussions before we do votes. And of course, if it takes more than a couple weeks, because the HIP author is like, I got a lot of feedback, I'm not ready to take it to a vote yet, that's fine too. So it's not like there's a 2-week timer that says at the end of 2 weeks we must vote. It's more like we're going to have at least 2 weeks, unless there's a real strong reason not to, so that people have a chance to do the review before we vote. But we could vote, and we could vote and say, I don't think that it's ready yet, or we could vote and say, yep, it's good, or we could vote and say, there's no way in this world that we're going to permit this one to go through. I mean, there's sort of different outcomes that we can end up getting. Now, internally, what we do, oftentimes we work on HIPs for a long time. We've got HIPs that have been ideas for years that even ones that we had written up in sort of internal notes at Hashgraph, but we never got it to the point where we were like, yeah, okay, this is ready to go out into the world. And so they just sort of sit in a bin waiting for the, the day of their glory. And I think that's perfectly fine for you to do in your own workflows as well. And that's great. Now, internally, we also, there's a group of us that always review every hit before we bring it out, including myself and Lehman, and Jasper and Atul. Like we always review them before they come out so that by the time we publish them, we, at least as a company, we're aligned on the direction and we're like, yeah, okay, this is something that we want to do. Now, what I would say is that if you're doing like Michael, you had your hip, I pointed Stephen at it and said, "Hey, Stephen, take a look at this," and so that we could get his feedback. If you or anybody in the community who's say outside of Hashgraph wants an extra pair of eyes before you bring it to the TSC, I would be very happy to set up calls with you and review it and go through things in detail. And we can take advantage of these great engineers who've got a lot of experience in the system to review the hips before they go public. Or you can just publish it and bring it to the TSC. I'd say we're just here as a resource if you think that that would be helpful. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just stick it in the agenda and add it to our list and move it forward.
Thanks,
Okay,
Richard and Hendrik. That was great.
so your questions
I have
are,
one more question. Sorry, I guess I should raise my hand. This for etiquette. Okay, raise my hand.
yeah,
Yeah, Michael, you're so rude.
Okay. Sorry. If somebody were to present a hip and let's say it got voted through, and it's not Hashgraph or what's the sort of who's going to put the work in to make that feature live?
Well, good question. Whoever wants to.
Whoever
So
wants to. Okay. Okay.
yeah, so let's say that we had a hip and we all approved it and said, "Yep, that looks like a great hip." Then it's up to somebody to pick up the work and implement it. And who that somebody is could be anybody. Somebody in the world could just say, "I love that hip. I'm going to create a PR." They create a PR. If it goes through the PR process and gets merged in, then it's in. A maintainer could pick it up and say, "I'm going to work on that hip," and they can implement the hip and create a PR, and it gets reviewed, and they merge it in. And typically in open source, the way that the way it's intended to work is people scratch their own itches. So if there's something that you want, then you go through the process of creating the PR and getting it merged and everything. Sometimes people misunderstand open source and they think, well, I'm just going to put in an idea, but then somebody else will implement it and I'll complain if it doesn't get done. And that's of course not the way it's intended to work. In the open source world, if you really care about something, you do it. And if you don't, you're just relying on the generosity of strangers to do the work for you. So if your idea aligns with the priorities of somebody who wants to do the implementation, great. Otherwise, you do the implementation yourself. So there's no obligation on any maintainer or anybody in the world to implement a HIP just because it got approved. It just means that the HIP can be implemented and merged in. And
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
any other questions on that topic, on hips in general?
Yeah, no, I had one, and one of the things that Richard said kind of brought this up in my mind, which is we often have hips, and they don't get implemented right away. There are obviously resource limitations, competing priorities, and what have you. And every so often, you could have a hip that becomes overcome by events. Either there are changes in the code base that make that previous idea either irrelevant or maybe not even practical to implement. So I guess the question I have is there a value or opportunity to ensure that we have a clean HIP list by reviewing, saying, yep, this HIP was approved, but the circumstances have changed, or the underlying technologies or code base has changed to the extent that that HIP is no longer, if we voted on today, it would not be accepted. Any thoughts of how something like that might be done or incorporated?
Michael?
I was thinking perhaps you could just withdraw the HIP, put it in a state of withdrawal. Or deferred if there's some situation where you're thinking you might implement it later, but it's just circumstances are not good.
Yeah, I was wondering from a TSC perspective, from a governance point of view, if there's any thoughts or ideas, or even more broadly in the open source realm, what the normal practices would be, so that we're not dealing with a cluttered list of issues, or HIPs that may or may not ever be worked upon, just so we don't waste our time. Other than somebody who actually originally did it says, oh, it's that they themselves withdraw it. Yeah, not something
In
we can.
theory, that
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
shouldn't happen.
May? So I think May, you or I at least have not fully understood what you said. Okay, Michael, you had a short hands up.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, Alex, are you talking about before a HIP gets to Hiero review?
Oh no, I'm referring to if
Mhm.
HIP. Say there's a HIP 04. Just making up a number that's low, given that the HIP numbers right now are over 1,000, 1,200, et cetera, whatever. If something that was proposed a while ago was, again, you would not see it as, it would either be duplicative with something that's already been done. It achieves the same outcomes, but just in a different way, or is no longer relevant. The need no longer exists, or whatever the case might be that makes that HIP no longer relevant. And I see that there's a circle there about replaced. Can you explain maybe by the circling what that
I
process
just
means?
Yeah, I just circled it because I assume that is more or less what you're trying to describe, right? So there's
Maybe
another
it could
hit,
be.
something else that says like, oh yeah, this is replaced by a new functionality, by a new hip. Actually, I ask myself if that error here would make sense, because that is what you described. Like maybe it's not completely done, but something else already comes. But this is just me drawing here arrows into
Yeah,
that.
I think that
You
that
know?
makes sense.
Yeah.
But I do
So
think it's probably after approved, because if it's in the code, it probably gets deprecated
okay.
Later. I was talking about just before it actually even goes to the point of getting resources towards it for
Yeah.
development.
Michael, do you know how many replaced ones we have?
We have several, but I haven't really seen a situation. I've seen one situation where after it was approved, we're trying to figure out what to do with it. Do we withdraw it or what? And I'm thinking that you're right in your judgment that there should be an arrow from approved to replaced, and that's probably the correct status.
Hmm.
That feels most right.
Okay. No, it's just trying to keep things as streamlined as possible when we look at from a road mapping perspective, et cetera. But again, probably more to noodle on that. But the general concept here seems to be there, just tuning kind of where and how it's executed.
Good. And I see we have questions on the chat regarding HIPs too, and there was a question, if I understood it correctly. Okay, somebody creates an HIP like in the technical, no, in the written way. So does the definition of an HIP, and that gets approved. And how is that person then, when it comes to really creating the code, merging the code, is that person then part of that workflow, or is that done by somebody totally different? If I understood the question correctly, Sophie. And I would say that heavily depends. My personal point of view is you cannot write a HIP if you are not in those technical details. But there are some HIPs, you could write a HIP because you very good in the SDKs and things like that, but have no idea how to implement that on consensus node, as an example. So that comes with the complexity of the system we have, right? With multiple parts coming together, written in different programming language and so on. So let's assume somebody who's working on the Java and JavaScript SDK creates a HIP that does something new. And I hope that this person will do the implementation at least for the Java and JavaScript SDK. I hope that the maintainers, committers, or the community in general from the Python SDK will then work on the implementation of the Python SDK, and people working on the consensus node will do on the other side of the fence, on the server, the implementation of the HIP in the consensus node. And that is, from my point of view, one of the ideas behind this SDK hub that we have now, because there all the different SDKs, different people working on the SDKs in different languages can come together and discuss and define how a HIP should be implemented from the SDK's point of view. But even if the person who does it in the SDK hub don't need to be the person who do the implementation in all the SDKs, that again can be individual persons. So yeah, highly depends. I hope that answer is good enough, because there is just no yes or no on that one. It's more like, I hope that this person got involved and not create a HIP and then don't care about how it's implemented. But that is not how we work today. So yeah. Yeah, that's nice. So Sophie would really like, I assume, on the SDK side to help brainstorm how HIPs can be implemented and what skills and so on are required. That's a good point, especially now with the SDK hub and things like that. I hope that we can form the diverse group of people working on exactly that. That would be maybe, Sophie, that could be something for the SDK community meetings. And I believe Rob is totally open for that to discuss workflows. How can we as the SDK community move that forward? Cool. Anything else? If not, I have one last point, and then we will definitely, Keith, have enough time for you to talk about digital identity and give an update on that. So the last point I have here is that Jessica and I worked on a proposal or a template for project proposals. And as you can see, there are already some comments on it. So I assume again that will be merged in near future. So if you are interested in that, please have a look. We took the different proposals we had so far, added all the discussions we had like 2 or 3 weeks ago when we had the Hedera CLI, and out of that created this proposal that should then contain like OpenSSF scorecard, information about releases, about contributors, about the architecture, metadata about like the license and the repositories if it's an existing project, the scope of the project, and so on. So we assume that this would be a very good overview of a project, so that based on that information, the TSC can decide way better if a project makes sense under Hiero, if it makes sense to try to move it to the LFDT incubation first, and so on and so on. So that's it on the new routes and documentations that are currently coming. And if there are no other questions or comments, we can come to any other business, which first of all will be Keith talking about digital identity. Are there any other topics? Does somebody would to like to add another topic? Was that you wanted to say something, Migan? Yeah.
Yeah, not a different topic, but just something. Maybe you mentioned it slightly. That to jump out a few minutes when we talked about the election. Is it an idea to because I remember for myself that when the first election was there, it was quite confusing to wrap my head around the different terminology being used as end user, a contributor, and maintainer to clearly describe who's eligible. I think you established, or it was established, that anyone is eligible, and also who can vote, because I believe the voting according to TSC technical charter is only by maintainers, for the maintainers.
Yeah.
So that's just for others. I mean, obviously I've read through the technical charter too many times, so I kind of know it now. But maybe for others that read it, that they understand, what the seat is, and who's going to vote, and that those maintainers vote as well. That we clearly communicate to them, hey, this is a seat you can vote on. Because I always enjoy seeing like if we have good participation among the people that can actually vote. Because if it's just a few people, it's like, oh, that's a pity. If we will, maybe it's to us, but at least I want to eliminate the chance that we tell ourselves, oh, we didn't do enough to communicate that they could have voted. So
yeah. So your idea is to have something like, oh, what's the English word for that? Is it a cursor? Is it English too, cursor?
I don't know.
Like where all the words are described in a quite short way. Like what is the end user? What is the maintainer? Is that what you think about? Or
that's actually a good idea. Or maybe we can have a few lines. Maybe we can have a few lines in the top, like, hey, there are several elections for TSC. X are voted by TSC. X are voted by end users. X are voted by contributors. X are voted by maintainers. This election is for the maintainer seat, which means that all maintainers within the Hiero project can vote, and so on.
Okay.
It's just like a little introduction thing. Okay, that people instantly get it, what it's about, who addresses it, and so on.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I put it on my list, and since Jessica and I now have done the topics from the last 2 weeks with those 3 documentations, now we have a new goal for next week to create a TSC voting manual or something. Yeah, I like the idea. Absolutely. Yeah, Jessica does hands up. That's good. We will do that. Okay, cool. Anything else? Good. Keith, yeah?
Yeah, okay. Should I go?
Yeah, you have 10 minutes left. The stage is
Okay.
yours.
I won't quite need that, but so this is a question for the TSC. So maybe I can just give some quick background. This actually connects very closely to a lot of the questions that came up during Michael Hashgraph Online's presentation about bringing the HCS standards to Hiero. It's a similar vein. So just to give a little background, we have on the identity space, we have did Hedera, and just understand the structure. Underlying did Hedera is something called the did method, which is basically like the did Hedera specification. Currently, this lives in the Hashgraph repo. I think we've struggled with this one, but we've kind of said, well, because it's the did Hedera method, maybe it should live in the Hedera repo, although I think this is one of our topics of conversation. But basically, this is the specification for how you write a library, or how you would adhere to the did Hedera specification, how you write a library and then it adheres to the specification. So it's just to separate out, like, this is the specification. And then as many of you know, we have actually many libraries that are built to that specification. And those libraries can be built by they're built by a range of teams, a range of community members, build and maintain libraries, but they all adhere to this specification. So something new that we've been working on is under one of the HIPs is the non-creds. This has come up a few times, and we actually have added the in Hiero we have the Python did library, which specifically supports this. Well, likewise, we have we're introducing a Hiero, a non-creds method. So this is, again, the specification for how
Does anybody still hear Keith?
Yeah,
Or
I was happy to see them moving, so I was like, okay, it's not me.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Keith, you were frozen for like a minute. Sorry, can you? We at the start of this document, you stopped. Like we saw the Hiero logo on the Aeon Creds document, and then you stopped.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you and see how your camera is working now. Yeah, it was just half a minute, something you were frozen.
Okay, apologize for that. So I'll just start again. So we have the did method specification, and then we have many libraries written by the community which are adhere to that specification. So recently we've been working on something called the non-creds. And we have a specification for our non-creds. And then if you go in, we're actually going to have two repos in Hiero in Python and in JavaScript, which adhere to this specification. So this specification today lives on the DSR repo. So the first request is to TSC, this is an open discussion. We would like to create a repo on Hiero where this specification can live. There's also this open question, like I said, we also have this did Hedera specification, which is currently on Hashgraph, and should that also be moved to Hiero? Where it is more of a chain specific specification, but it's probably of interest to the Hiero community. Maybe my larger meta question is, like, over time we might have more specifications. Should we just be creating repos for new specifications, or should maybe we just have a Hiero specifications repo, and in that we have many folders where people can add new Hiero specifications over time? So I think these are my questions I'd like to explore. And Henrik, I saw you put your hands up.
Yeah, because I wanted to suggest exactly that. We had now the same discussion with Homebrew, like this tool where you can easily on Mac install Turing, because we will have some tool to provide Homebrew support in future. And the first to ask about an Homebrew repo, and there we said, like, oh yeah, it would make sense to have just one repo and then do code ownership of parts of it, so that every Homebrew plugin or recipe, I don't know how to call it, is in one repo and then separated in that repo. And my assumption, especially, I think you said once there are really a lot of different specifications here, and a lot will come. And with that in mind, I believe having one repo that is well structured would totally make sense from my point of view here.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And I guess the question, maybe if Michael Cantor is still online, like what, I mean, because I think the same topic came up for you, like all the HCS specifications, would they make sense to go under like a single Hiero specification repo? Or maybe in your case, it's special. Maybe it does make sense to be in its own repo like it is today.
He is not on the call anymore.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, I don't understand the discussion we're having, and maybe we need to spend more time socializing this and understanding it first. But I don't really understand what we're talking about a specification repo for.
Well, like we want to move this specification to Hiero. We can either do it in its own repo, or we could have more of a common repo for all specifications. Maybe what part of Richard is that? Maybe
I think maybe we should talk about this more first.
okay.
But Richard, are you is it more related that it's not code per se, but it's just a specification, kind of like saying TLS
We
is
have a
specification.
specification system, which is called the HIP process. Why are we storing additional specifications? I don't understand. Why would we have a single repo with all these specifications in them? I don't understand. Who controls these specifications? I don't understand. I don't understand what any of this is all about. And so I think maybe we should have a broader, we need to, I would like to understand that before we try to make any sort of decision on what we're doing here.
So, yeah, I'm sure we can have a conversation, but I'm thinking we have different kinds of HIPs, right? Application HIPs, et cetera, and to the extent that this is it is a HIP that the output of which is not executable code, but the HIP itself is the
Actually, maybe Alex, maybe I do understand Richard's point. So maybe I should explain more. This specification, this method, because what this is based on is a W3C specification. So we're actually following an industry standard where you take the W3C specification and then you create your own method under that specification and you publish it. So and we publish it in a way that kind of follows the specification, the global specification. So this is really an effort to follow industry identity best practices about how you publish out, how you read and write these identity objects to a ledger. So you're right, Richard. We could do it through a HIP. It's just like that's not the way that it's done in the identity space. Most times, people they create their specification and they publish it for everyone to read and understand in kind of a common way.
Is this a HIP?
No, I would say this is much more like the HCS specifications. This is a specification about how you read and write objects to Hedera, and then there can be many libraries built off this specification as there are, and those are done by HIPs or can be done by HIPs.
Keith, a question, but there is, I mean, that is the specification that we're seeing here, but there is in parallel to that one code, right? So there's code like on top of our did Python SDK or on top of our did JavaScript SDK that takes this specification and makes that work with our did SDKs or not?
Well,
how is that related?
So let's just use a direct example. This is the Hiero SDK.js. This specification will adhere to, this library, this code, which reads and writes objects to Hedera Consensus Service, will adhere to this specification about how you read and write things from HCS.
And then there will be a Hiero JavaScript encrypts SDK that has an API directly for that. Or that is always what where I have problems with to understand. I understand. Okay, we have the JavaScript SDK that does the transaction. You can use it to run against any Hiero network. Sure. Then we have a given did specification, right now the one for encrypts. But I, as a user like a technical user who develops something, my assumption would be there are ready methods I can call to do exactly what is, written down in the specification, so that I don't need to read the specification and create something on top of a library. Or is that currently the case? That is my question here, to understand it better.
So this specification, this non-code specification basically tells people how they read and write objects to HCS. And this library, the Hiero SDK.js, which exists today, will implement that standard working with the Hedera JavaScript SDK. Will implement these standards to read and write those objects to HCS.
Oh, I think you have the wrong repo open. You want to open
it's not the wrong repo. This will be the one that's also all the Hiero function. Oh, you're right. I do have the wrong repo. Sorry, I mean the did SDK repo.
Yeah. Okay, now because that was currently for me a lot of confusion. Got it. So in the Hiero did JavaScript, we will then have like a folder, a part, a package, whatever that is specific to encrypts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Understood.
I mean, this is a general purpose SDK. It can read and write DIDs. It can read and write non-creds objects, but all based on the specifications that we publish.
Yeah. Okay. Understood.
Sorry about that confusion. Right?
Yeah.
I have a question. So why can't the HCS standard just be absorbed into the HIPs, like informational HIPs, or what? I don't know what the standard is.
Again, because we're trying to follow a standard process that is outside of Hedera. So like
I know, but I'm saying HCS itself, like that standard, why does it exist, and why doesn't it just fall under the HIP repository as an informational HIP? Why? Yeah, I guess that's my question. And then we're like integrating it in a lot of this stuff, and it's seeming to make it complicated when it doesn't have to be as complicated.
What's complicated, Michael? Because let's just use the micro.
All under HIPs, then you're dealing with HIPs. You're referencing HIPs. But if they fall under HCS, which is some other it like exists outside of the HIP process, I don't understand the Hiero process. I don't understand why it just can't be like what's the reason we can't have them as HIPs? I guess is a better question.
Because we are trying to follow like a standard pattern, because did methods go beyond Hedera. They follow a standard specification, and there are hundreds and hundreds of did methods. So we are trying to align with standards outside of Hedera. So outside of Hedera, they don't look for a specification in a HIP. They look for a specification more like how it's presented here. Like this is how they would read and understand a specification. And this is the common format for these specifications. So we're trying to align to global standards outside of just Hedera.
Okay.
Question, Keith, to maybe align all that, couldn't this what we're now seeing here? And I understand that you want to have it in the same, like format in the same way than others. Couldn't that be the outcome of an HIP? So that we say, hey, there's a new did format, whatever. We create a HIP that we want to have that in Hiero, And when the HIP got approved, what we're seeing here on the screen is the thing that would be created. Could that be
Okay.
a thing that
Yeah,
makes
I think if we want to, I mean, basically what I'm requesting is the creation of a repo, but if we want to do that through a HIP, the HIP process, I'm fine with that. So I can create a HIP that requests the creation of the repo and also standardizes the specification itself.
Keith, I would say not regarding the repo, but whenever we want to add a specification to the repo, maybe that should be done by an HIP. Does that make sense? Would that
Sure,
make
I'm happy to take a pass at that. So I can create a HIP around the support of this non-creds repo.
Yeah,
Sorry, this non-cred specification.
Yeah, and the repo, once that HIP is done, we can easily, say like, hey, we create a project proposal for this is the DIT specs project, and then we create the repo out of that, and the implementation could go into that repo. That could be I just see like others like Richard are not in this meeting anymore. But from my point of view, that could be a way to go, maybe.
Okay. Yep. All right, that sounds great. I'll take that action.
Okay. Thanks everybody again, and hope to see you in any future Hiero meeting, like the Hiero community meeting we have today regarding the Solo community, or any other meeting this week or next week on the TSC. Bye.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.